The scream died in Helena Brennan's throat as her feet plunged through another drift of snow, the cold biting through her worn skirts like 1,000 needles. And behind her she could hear Marcus shouting her name with that terrible rage she had come to know too well during their 3 years of marriage. The winter of 1883 had brought unprecedented snowfall to Santa Fe, New Mexico, a rarity in this high desert country, and now that freak blizzard might be the death of her. She pushed forward through the waist-deep powder, her lungs burning with each gasping breath, her hands numb despite being buried in the folds of her cloak. The divorce papers had been finalized only 2 weeks ago, but Marcus refused to accept that she was no longer his property to control, to hurt, to break. Helena. His voice carried across the white expanse, closer than before, and panic surged fresh through her veins. She had thought leaving during the storm would cover her tracks, make it impossible for him to follow, but she had underestimated his determination and overestimated her own strength. The snow was too deep, her progress too slow, and exhaustion was setting in with frightening speed. Through the curtain of falling snow, she spotted a dark shape ahead, a building of some kind. Hope flared bright and desperate in her chest as she forced her legs to move faster, falling forward more than walking now, her skirts heavy with accumulated ice and snow. The structure resolved itself into a barn, weathered wood dark against the endless white, and beyond it, she could barely make out the shape of a small ranch house. She did not care who owned this property. She would beg, plead, do whatever necessary to find shelter from both the storm and the man pursuing her. Her frozen fingers fumbled at the barn door, and for one horrible moment she thought it might be locked, but then it shifted under her weight and she half fell inside. The sudden absence of wind felt like a blessing from heaven itself. The barn was dim, lit only by the gray light filtering through cracks in the walls, but it was blessedly warmer than outside. She could smell hay and horses, hear the soft shuffle of animals in their stalls. Helena pulled the door closed behind her and leaned against it, trying to catch her breath, trying to think. You are either running from the law or from a man. The voice came from the shadows to her left, calm and measured, with a hint of a Western drawl. Given the way you are dressed and the terror in your eyes, I would wager it is the latter. Helena spun around, her heart hammering, and saw him standing near one of the horse stalls. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard for their living, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that assessed her with sharp intelligence. He wore simple working clothes, a leather vest over a wool shirt, and he held a curry brush in one hand as though she had interrupted him in the middle of tending his horses. He looked to be perhaps 26 or 27, only a few years older than her own 23. Please, she managed, her voice shaking from cold and fear. Please, he is coming. He will kill me if he finds me. The cowboy's expression hardened. He set down the brush with deliberate care. Your husband, ex-husband. The divorce was finalized, but he refuses to accept it. He has been following me for days, and I thought the storm would stop him, but nothing stops him. The words tumbled out in a rush. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but if you could just let me hide here until he passes, until the storm ends, I will be gone and you will never see me again. What is your name? He asked. Helena Brennan. Xander Quinn. He moved toward her with surprising speed and she flinched instinctively, but he only reached past her to secure the barn door with a heavy wooden bar. That will slow him down if he tries to come in. How far behind you is he? I do not know. Minutes, maybe. I could hear him calling my name. She was shaking violently now, whether from cold or shock she could not tell. Xander studied her face for a moment, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. There is a loft, he said, gesturing upward. Climb up there and bury yourself in the hay. Do not make a sound no matter what you hear. You understand? Yes. She wanted to thank him, to explain everything, but there was no time. Already she could hear shouting outside, muffled by the walls but unmistakably Marcus's voice. Xander practically lifted her onto the ladder leading to the loft, and she climbed with desperate speed, her frozen hands barely able to grip the rungs. The loft was piled deep with sweet-smelling hay, and she burrowed into it as Xander had instructed, covering herself completely, trying to control her ragged breathing. Through the small gaps in the hay, she could see Xander moving below, returning to the horse stall, picking up his brush again as though nothing had happened. His posture was relaxed, casual, but she noticed he positioned himself between the door and the ladder to the loft. The pounding on the barn door came hard and aggressive. "Open up! I know she came this way." Xander waited a long moment before responding. "Who is asking, Marcus Brennan? I am looking for my wife. She is not well, out of her mind with fever. I have been trying to catch her before she hurts herself in this storm." Helena pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle any sound. It was so like Marcus to have a plausible story ready, to make himself sound like the concerned husband rather than the monster he truly was. Xander unbarred the door and opened it just wide enough to reveal his frame blocking the entrance. "I have not seen anyone. Been in here with my horses for the past hour. She must have come this way. Her tracks lead straight toward your property." Marcus's voice was sharp with suspicion and barely contained violence. "Tracks would be covered in minutes in this storm," Xander said reasonably. "Could have gone anywhere. Could have doubled back, could have collapsed in a drift somewhere. If your wife is as ill as you say, you had better search quickly. Let me look inside your barn." "No." The single word hung in the air like a challenge. Helena's heart stopped. She knew Marcus, knew his temper, knew what he was capable of when crossed. "This is my wife we are talking about," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "She is sick and confused. I need to find her." And I said no. Xander's tone remained even, but there was steel underneath it. "This is my property. I have told you I have not seen anyone. Now I suggest you move along before you freeze to death yourself. Check with the neighbors if you are so concerned." There was a long, tense silence. Helena could imagine Marcus weighing his options, trying to decide if he could force his way past Xander. She held her breath, praying Marcus would not try. She did not want this stranger who was helping her to come to harm on her account. "If I find out you are lying to me," Marcus finally said, "I will come back, and you will regret it. I will take that chance. Now get off my land." The door slammed shut and Xander barred it again. But he did not call up to Helena. Instead, he returned to his horse and continued brushing its coat, humming softly under his breath. She understood. Marcus might be watching the barn, waiting to see if anyone emerged. They had to maintain the illusion that nothing was amiss. She must have lost consciousness, because the next thing she knew, gentle hands were pulling hay away from her face, and Xander was speaking her name softly. "Helena, he is gone. It has been over an hour. You need to come down from there before you freeze." She tried to move and discovered her body would not cooperate. The cold had seeped so deep into her bones that she could barely feel her extremities. Xander did not wait for her to struggle. He simply climbed into the loft and lifted her as though she weighed nothing, carrying her down the ladder with practiced ease. "My house," he said. "You need to get warm and dry, or you will lose fingers and toes to frostbite." "He might come back," she managed through chattering teeth. "If he sees smoke from your chimney, your lights in the windows, he might come to check. I live alone. I always have fires and lights in the evening. There is nothing unusual about that." He kicked open the barn door and carried her through the driving snow toward the ranch house. Besides, I saw him ride off toward town. He will not be back tonight, not in this weather. The house was small but solidly built, and the warmth inside felt like a physical blow after the brutal cold. Xander set her on a chair near the cast iron stove and immediately began stoking the fire, building it higher. Then he knelt before her and began unlacing her boots. "I can do that," she protested weakly. "Your hands are like ice. You cannot even feel your fingers, can you?" He did not wait for an answer, just carefully removed her boots and the thick woolen stockings beneath. Her feet were alarmingly white, and he frowned at the sight. "This is not good. When did you last feel your toes?" "I do not know. An hour ago, maybe more." He stood and moved to a cabinet, pulling out blankets and what looked like strips of cloth. "I need to get you out of those wet clothes. Your skirts are frozen solid in places. Can you manage it yourself if I give you privacy, or do you need help?" The thought of undressing in a stranger's house, in front of a strange man, should have horrified her. But Marcus had stripped away her capacity for that kind of shame. And besides, she trusted something in Xander Quinn's steady gaze, the way he had protected her without question or hesitation. "I think I need help," she admitted quietly. He nodded as though this was perfectly normal and proceeded to help her out of her cloak, her frozen dress, the layers of petticoats beneath. His touch was impersonal, efficient, like a brother helping a sister, and he kept his eyes carefully averted. When she was down to her chemise and drawers, he wrapped her in blankets and sat her closer to the stove. "I am going to rub your feet and hands," he told her. "It is going to hurt like hellfire, but it means the blood is returning. If you need to cry out, do it. There is no one to hear but me and the horses." He was not exaggerating. As he massaged her frozen extremities, the pain was excruciating, like being stabbed with hot needles. Helena bit her lip until she tasted blood, trying not to scream, but small whimpers escaped despite her best efforts. Xander kept up a steady stream of quiet encouragement, his strong hands never faltering in their work. "Why are you helping me?" she asked when she could speak again. "You do not know me. I could be everything Marcus said. I could be mad, dangerous. You are not mad." He moved from her feet to her hands, rubbing each finger individually. "I have seen women who have been hurt by men before. I recognize that look. The way you flinched when I moved too quickly in the barn, the fear in your eyes that goes deeper than just being cold and lost." "How do you know about such things?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "My mother. She married a bad man after my father died. I was 12 years old and too small to protect her properly. By the time I was big enough to fight back, the damage was done. She died when I was 15. Her heart just gave out one day, but I know it was really him who killed her, just slowly over years." "I am sorry," Helena whispered. "It is long past now, but I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help a woman in a similar situation, I would. No questions asked, no judgment passed." He released her hands and stood. "I am going to make you something hot to drink. Tea if you prefer, or I have coffee." "Tea, please." She watched him move around the small kitchen area of the one-room house, efficient and capable in his movements. The interior was simple but clean, with a bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies and a few books. A rifle hung above the door, and she saw a pistol belt hanging on a peg. The home of a man who lived alone but who took pride in his space. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, partly to distract herself from the lingering pain in her extremities, partly because she genuinely wanted to know more about this man who had saved her life. 3 years. "I worked as a ranch hand for various outfits until I saved enough to buy this piece of land and build the house and barn myself. It is not much, but it is mine." He brought her a steaming cup of tea, sweetened with honey. "I run a small herd of cattle, breed horses when I can, make enough to get by. It sounds like a good life. It suits me. He pulled the other chair closer and sat down. Now, I think you should tell me your story, Helena. The real story, so I know what I am dealing with. This ex-husband of yours, is he going to be a problem? So she told him everything. How she had met Marcus Brennan 4 years ago when she was 19, newly arrived in Santa Fe after her parents died of illness in St. Louis. How charming he had seemed at first, how attentive and devoted. How that had changed after the wedding, the gradual escalation of control and cruelty. The first time he hit her. The way he isolated her from anyone who might help. The escape she finally managed 3 months ago when he was away on business, and the long, difficult process of obtaining a divorce, which was scandalous enough in 1883, but even harder when the husband contested it. The judge finally granted it 2 weeks ago, she said, staring into her tea. I thought I was free, but Marcus has been watching me, following me. 3 days ago, he broke into the room I was renting and tried to drag me out, said the divorce did not matter, that I would always belong to him. I barely got away. I have been running ever since. Where were you trying to go? Xander asked. Anywhere. Nowhere. I just knew I had to keep moving. She looked up at him, exhausted and desperate. I have no family, no friends here who are not too afraid of Marcus to help me. I thought if I could get to another town, maybe Denver or even California, I could start over where he could not find me. You would never make it, not with him tracking you, not with winter setting in. Xander was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Stay here. What? Stay here, he repeated. Not forever if you do not want to, but until the weather clears and it is safe to travel. I have space. You can sleep in the loft. I will sleep down here. It is not proper by most standards, but propriety means less than survival right now. I cannot ask that of you. If Marcus finds out, he will come back. He will hurt you. Let him try. There was no bravado in Xander's voice, just simple fact. I have dealt with dangerous men before. I can handle Marcus Brennan. You do not understand. He has powerful friends, connections in town. He could make trouble for you, ruin your reputation, your business. My reputation is my own concern. And as for business, I deal mostly with ranchers and cowboys who care more about the quality of my horses than about gossip. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Helena, you are exhausted. You have been running for days in the middle of a blizzard. You need rest, safety, time to figure out your next move. Let me provide that, at least for a little while. She wanted to refuse, to insist she could not impose, but the truth was she had nowhere else to go. And something about Xander Quinn made her feel safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. Just until the storm passes, she finally agreed. And then I will find a way to repay you for your kindness. There is no debt. He stood and moved to a trunk in the corner, pulling out what looked like men's clothing. These were mine when I was younger and not quite so broad in the shoulders. They will be big on you, but they are clean and dry. You can sleep in them until your dress dries out. That first night she slept in the loft above the main room, buried under every blanket Xander could spare, and for the first time in weeks she felt secure enough to truly rest. Below, she could hear him moving around quietly, banking the fire for the night, settling in. It should have been frightening, sleeping in a strange man's home. Instead, it felt like sanctuary. The storm continued for 3 more days, and during that time Helena and Xander fell into an easy rhythm. He went out each morning and evening to tend the animals, checking on his small herd of cattle that were sheltered in a nearby canyon, making sure his horses had feed and water. She cooked, which was a pleasure after months of barely being able to feed herself, and cleaned, though his house was already neat. Mostly they talked. She learned that Xander was 27, that he had been born in Texas but drifted north after his mother died, unable to stay in the place that held so many painful memories. He had worked cattle drives, served briefly as a deputy in a small town in Colorado, learned to break and train horses from an old Apache man who had taught him more about understanding animals than any white man ever had. He read voraciously when he could get books, favored poetry though he would never admit it to most people, and had a dry sense of humor that surprised her into laughter more than once. He learned that she had wanted to be a teacher before her parents died, that she loved music and used to play piano, that she had a talent for drawing though she had not picked up a pencil in years. She told him about the small joys she had clung to during her marriage, the garden she had kept, the stray cat she had fed, the sunset views from her window that had reminded her the world was still beautiful even when her life was not. "You should teach," Xander said on the third evening as they sat by the fire after supper. "When you get to wherever you are going, there is always a need for teachers, especially ones who genuinely care about learning. I would need references, credentials. I have nothing but the clothes on my back and the few coins in my pocket. You have your mind, your education. That is worth more than any physical possession." He stood and went to his bookshelf, pulling down a worn volume. "Here, take this with you when you go. It is poetry, Whitman. Maybe it will remind you that new beginnings are possible." She took the book carefully, running her fingers over the cover. It was clearly well loved, pages soft from repeated reading. "This is yours. I cannot take something that means so much to you. Then consider it a loan. You can return it someday if our paths cross again." He smiled, and she realized with a start how handsome he was when he smiled, how much younger and less careworn he looked. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. The sky cleared to a brilliant blue, and sunlight sparkled off the deep snow like scattered diamonds. Xander went out early to check the roads and returned with news. "The main road to town is passable, barely. Another day or two and travel will be easier." Helena felt a confusing mix of relief and disappointment. She should be anxious to leave, to put more distance between herself and Marcus. Instead, she found herself wanting to stay in this small, warm house with this quiet man who had shown her more kindness in a few days than she had known in years. "I should go soon," she made herself say. "You have already done so much for me." "Where will you go?" Xander asked. "I thought I might try to get to Albuquerque first. It is not far, and from there I could work my way north or west. Find a town small enough that Marcus would not think to look for me there." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. "Or you could stay." Her heart skipped. What? Stay here? Not as a guest, but as a partner. He turned to face her, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression, a hope he was trying to contain. "I know it is sudden. I know we have only known each other a few days. But I could use help running this place, and you need somewhere safe to be. We could make it a business arrangement if that makes you more comfortable. You work the ranch with me, help with the horses and cattle, and in return you have a home and protection." "Xander, I cannot just move in with you." "Even as a business arrangement, people would talk. Then we make it proper." He took a breath. "Marry me." She stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." He moved closer, not touching her but close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Helena, I know this is fast. I know you have every reason to be wary of marriage after what you went through. But this would be different. It would be a true partnership built on respect and equality. I would never raise my hand to you, never try to control you. You would have just as much say in the running of this ranch as I do. And you would have my name, my protection, legal standing that Marcus could not challenge. Why would you do this? You barely know me. I know enough." I know you are brave. You ran through a blizzard rather than submit to a man who hurt you. I know you are kind. I have watched how gently you handle the horses, how you set out scraps for the birds even though we barely have enough food ourselves. I know you are smart and capable and that you deserve a life that does not involve constant fear. He paused. And I know that in these few days, I have come to care about what happens to you, more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. I just got out of a terrible marriage. I cannot just jump into another one. This would not be the same. We could take it slow. The marriage would be legal, real, but we would not have to rush the other aspects of it. Separate beds until and unless you are comfortable with more. No pressure, no expectations beyond partnership and mutual respect. His voice softened. But I will not lie and say I do not hope that someday it could become something deeper. These past few days with you have been the happiest I have had since I built this place. The house feels less empty with you in it. Helena's mind was spinning. Everything in her screamed caution, warned her against trusting any man so soon after Marcus. But Xander was nothing like Marcus. He had protected her without expecting anything in return, treated her with a gentleness and respect she had almost forgotten existed. And the truth was, she felt something too, something that had been growing over the past few days. A warmth in her chest when he smiled at her. A sense of peace when he was near. The beginning of something that could, given time, become love. If I agreed, she said slowly, it would have to be on my terms. Equal partners in truth, not just words. I would need to be able to leave if things became unbearable, no matter what the law says. Agreed, I would never keep you here against your will. And we go slow. I need time to heal from everything Marcus did. I cannot be a proper wife right away. I understand. Take all the time you need. She studied his face, searching for any sign of deception, any hint of the darkness she had learned to recognize in Marcus. But she saw only honesty, hope, and a careful tenderness that made her throat tight. Then yes, she whispered, I will marry you, Xander Quinn. His smile was like sunrise, warm and bright and full of promise. We should do it quickly, he said, before Marcus comes back sniffing around. We can ride into Santa Fe tomorrow, find the judge, make it legal. Once you are my wife, he has no claim on you whatsoever. He will be angry. Let him be angry. Anger without power is just noise, and once we are married, he will have no power over you. They rode into Santa Fe the next morning on Xander's 2 best horses. The world transformed into a pristine winter wonderland by the storm. Helena wore her dress, cleaned and dried, and borrowed a warmer cloak from Xander's collection. She was nervous, her stomach churning with anxiety about seeing Marcus, about what they were about to do, but Xander's steady presence beside her helped keep the panic at bay. The judge who had granted her divorce was surprised to see her again so soon, even more surprised when she appeared with Xander, asking to be married. But he performed the brief ceremony without much fuss, perhaps recognizing something in Helena's face that spoke of desperation. When it was done, she was Helena Quinn, and the relief she felt was almost overwhelming. They were leaving the courthouse when Marcus appeared on the street, stopping dead when he saw them together. His face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, understanding, and then fury. He started toward them, but Xander stepped forward, placing himself between Marcus and Helena. She is my wife now, Xander said quietly. Legally married before witnesses and judge. You have no claim on her, Brennan. Walk away. You conniving witch, Marcus snarled, trying to see around Xander. You planned this. You played at being helpless and terrified, and all along you were plotting to trap another man. I did not trap anyone, Helena said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. Xander offered me a choice, something you never did. I chose freely without coercion or fear. We are married and there is nothing you can do about it. I could challenge this. Claim coercion, impropriety. You could try, Xander agreed, but you would lose. The judge knows her situation. He knows about the divorce and your attempts to harass her afterward. If you push this, you will only embarrass yourself and possibly face legal consequences for your actions. He shifted his weight slightly, a subtle threat. And if you try to come near her again, if you set foot on my property or make any attempt to harm my wife, I will respond accordingly. Am I clear? Marcus looked between them, his jaw working, hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Helena thought he might try to attack Xander right there in the street. But there were people watching, curious townspeople drawn by the confrontation, and Marcus had always cared deeply about his reputation. Finally, he spat at the ground near their feet. You deserve each other, he said venomously. A damaged woman and a nobody rancher. I hope you are both miserable. He turned and stalked away, and Helena felt something inside her unclench, a tension she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten it was there. Is it really over? She asked quietly. It is really over, Xander confirmed. He knows he has lost. Men like that, their power comes from control and fear. Take that away and they are nothing. He will move on to some other target, some other woman he thinks he can dominate. His expression hardened. Though if I hear of him hurting anyone else, I may have to have another conversation with him. They bought supplies in town with the last of Helena's coins and some of Xander's savings, stocking up on food and necessities that would see them through the rest of the winter. People stared and whispered, word having already spread about the hasty marriage, but Helena found she did not care. Let them talk. She was safe, she was free, and she was married to a good man who had asked for nothing but her willing partnership. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them processing what had just happened, the irrevocable step they had taken. When they reached the house, Xander helped her down from her horse and they stood for a moment in the yard, the setting sun painting the snow in shades of orange and pink. This is real now, Helena said softly. We are actually married. We are. He hesitated, then gently took her hand. I meant what I said. We go at whatever pace you need. There is no rush for anything. She looked down at their joined hands, his rough and calloused from work, hers smaller and still showing the effects of her ordeal. I am afraid, she admitted, not of you but of myself. Of whether I am capable of trusting again, of being a proper partner. Marcus broke something in me and I do not know if it can be fixed. You are not broken, Xander said firmly. You are hurt, and that is different. Hurt can heal given time and care. We will figure this out together. He squeezed her hand gently. And for what it is worth, I think you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. Anyone who could survive what you did and still have kindness and hope left in them is extraordinary. Tears pricked at her eyes and she blinked them back. You see me differently than I see myself. Then maybe I can help you learn to see what I see. That night, they maintained their sleeping arrangements, Helena in the loft and Xander below, but something had shifted between them. They were no longer strangers thrown together by chance. They were partners, bound by law and by choice, beginning a journey neither of them could fully predict. The winter passed slowly. Xander taught Helena everything about running a ranch, and she proved to be a quick learner. She could ride well enough to help him check on the cattle, learned to recognize signs of illness in the horses, helped with the endless tasks of feeding, cleaning, mending. Her hands grew rough with work, her body stronger. She had never felt more exhausted at the end of each day, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from honest labor rather than constant vigilance and fear. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and read, sometimes aloud to each other, sometimes in companionable silence. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their histories, their hopes, their opinions on matters large and small. Xander made her laugh with stories of his early days as a cowboy, the ridiculous situations he had found himself in. She shared her memories of her parents, keeping them alive through the telling. Slowly, carefully, they began to know each other in the deep way that only comes from sharing daily life. She learned that he was deeply patient with animals but had little tolerance for human foolishness. That he had a sweet tooth he tried to hide. That he sometimes had nightmares about his mother and would wake thrashing and gasping. On those nights, she would climb down from the loft and make him tea, sitting with him until the fear subsided, never asking him to explain or justify his pain. He learned that she hummed when she cooked, unconscious melodies that filled the house with warmth. That she was fiercely intelligent and had opinions on everything from politics to philosophy. That she was haunted by guilt for not leaving Marcus sooner, for all the ways she thought she had failed herself. On those days, he would find gentle ways to remind her that survival was not failure, that she had done what she needed to do to stay alive. Spring came late to New Mexico in 1884, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. The cattle grew fat on new grass. Xander's horses had foals, and Helena spent hours watching them gambol in the pasture, delighted by their clumsy energy. One evening in April, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Helena realized that she had not thought about Marcus in days. That the constant background fear she had lived with for so long had faded to almost nothing. She glanced at Xander, sitting beside her on the bench he had built, and felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost frightened her. "I am happy," she said suddenly, surprised by the realization. "For the first time in years, I am genuinely happy." Xander turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was soft, tender. "I am glad. You deserve happiness, Helena. So do you." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I know we have been taking things slow, and I appreciate that more than I can say, but I think I am ready for this to be a real marriage, in all ways." He went very still. "Are you certain? There is no rush. I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain." She turned to face him fully. "Xander, over these past months I have come to care for you deeply. More than care. I think I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me, but in a good way, a hopeful way. I want to be your wife in truth, not just on paper, Helena." He said her name like a prayer, reaching up to cup her face with one hand. "I have been in love with you since the morning you made me laugh while we were mucking out the stalls, maybe even before that. I have been trying so hard to be patient, to give you space, but every day with you has been a gift." When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet, nothing like the bruising demands Marcus had called affection. It was a question and an answer all at once, a promise of tenderness and respect. Helena kissed him back, tears streaming down her face, not from sorrow but from overwhelming relief and joy. That night, she did not sleep in the loft. She came to Xander's bed, and he held her with such care, such reverence, that she finally understood what physical love could be when it was given freely between equals. There was no pain, no fear, only warmth and connection and the sweet discovery of each other. Afterwards, she lay in his arms and felt truly safe for the first time since she could remember. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what? For seeing me, for saving me, for giving me a reason to believe in good men again." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for trusting me, for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy who had almost given up on finding someone to share his life with." The ranch prospered over the following years. Xander's reputation as a horse trainer grew. and they began to make real money selling well-trained mounts to ranchers and the army. Helena started teaching children in the evenings, neighboring families sending their sons and daughters to learn reading and arithmetic. She charged only a little, but it gave her a sense of purpose beyond the ranch work, and she loved watching young minds open to learning. They faced challenges, of course. A hard winter in 1885 when they lost some cattle, a summer drought that tested their resources. The everyday struggles of making a living from the land, but they faced it all together, supporting each other through the difficulties, celebrating the victories. Helena never saw Marcus again. She heard through town gossip that he had eventually remarried, a young woman from a wealthy family in Albuquerque, and she felt a pang of fear for that unknown girl. She thought about warning her somehow, but Xander gently pointed out that it would only cause trouble and might not be believed anyway. The best she could do was survive, thrive, and be an example that escaping was possible. In the spring of 1886, Helena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never imagined herself as a mother, had been too consumed with survival to think about children. But Xander's delight was infectious, and slowly her fear transformed into excitement. What if I do not know how to be a good mother? She asked one night, her hand resting on her still flat belly. You will figure it out, Xander assured her, the same way we have figured out everything else, together. Their son was born in January of 1887, a healthy boy with dark hair and his father's eyes. They named him Samuel, after Xander's father, and Helena fell in love all over again, this time with the tiny human who depended on them completely. Xander was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Samuel when he cried at night, singing him silly cowboy songs that made Helena laugh. Watching her husband with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed, Helena felt the last remaining shadows from her time with Marcus finally lift. This was what family should be, she realized. Not control and fear, but love and partnership and shared joy. When Samuel was 6 months old, Helena looked up from nursing him one afternoon to find Xander watching them with an expression of such profound contentment that it took her breath away. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "That I am the luckiest man alive," he said simply. "That day you came stumbling through the snow into my barn, running from your demons, I thought I was just doing the right thing. I never imagined I would end up with everything I had ever wanted but thought I would never have." "We are both lucky," Helena said. "You gave me back my life, Xander. You showed me that not all men are cruel, that marriage can be a partnership of equals. You gave me safety and love, and now this beautiful boy. I could never repay that. You do not need to repay anything. What we have, we built it together." He came to sit beside them, putting his arm around Helena's shoulders, gazing down at their son. "This is just the beginning, you know. We are going to grow old on this ranch, you and I. Watch Samuel grow up, maybe give him brothers and sisters, build something lasting." "I like that vision," Helena murmured, leaning into his warmth, and that was exactly what they did. 2 years later, a daughter arrived and they named her Rose, then another son, Thomas, and finally another daughter, Grace. The small ranch house expanded over the years, new rooms added to accommodate their growing family. The barn was rebuilt, larger and stronger. The herd increased. They bought more land when it became available, slowly building a legacy. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved horses as much as his father did. Rose was wild and free-spirited, always covered in mud from playing outside. Thomas was gentle and artistic, drawing everything he saw. Grace was the baby, sweet and charming, wrapping everyone around her tiny finger. Helena taught all of them to read and write, and when more families settled in the area, she opened a small schoolhouse on their property, becoming the official teacher for the growing community. Xander served occasionally as a deputy when trouble arose, his reputation as a fair but firm man making him someone people trusted to keep the peace. They faced sorrows too. A miscarriage between Thomas and Grace that left Helena heartbroken for months. The death of Xander's old horse, the one who had been with him when he first started the ranch. Years when money was tight and they had to scrimp and save. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. In 1900, 17 years after that desperate flight through the snow, Helena stood in the yard of their ranch and watched the sunset, as she had done countless times before. Xander came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him, perfectly comfortable, perfectly content. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, echoing a question they had asked each other 1,000 times over the years. "About that day I ran through the snow and you hid me in your barn," she said. "About how terrified I was, how certain I was that my life was over. I could never have imagined this." She gestured at the prosperous ranch, the comfortable house from which the sounds of their children's laughter drifted. "All of this came from one act of kindness. You changed my entire life." "We changed each other's lives," Xander corrected gently. "I was just existing before you came. Going through the motions of living but not really alive. You brought warmth and purpose and love into my world. You made me a better man." She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to touch his face, now lined with the years but still handsome to her, still the face of the man who had saved her. "I love you, Xander Quinn. I have loved you for so long now that I can barely remember a time before it." "I love you too, Helena Quinn. Every day more than the day before." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in brilliant colors, and Helena thought about all the ways that life could change in an instant. How quickly everything could fall apart, but also how quickly it could come together again. How one moment of courage, one choice to trust, could lead to a lifetime of happiness. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Helena and Xander lay in their bed, comfortable in the darkness, hands linked between them as they had been for so many nights. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked suddenly. "Marrying me so quickly, taking on all my problems?" "Not for one single moment," Xander said firmly. "You were never a problem, Helena. You were an opportunity for something better than I had known how to hope for. My only regret is that I could not protect you from what came before, that you had to suffer before you found your way to me. Everything I went through led me here," she said softly. "I would not change it even if I could, because changing it might mean losing this. Losing you, losing our children, losing this life we have built. Then we are both exactly where we are meant to be." In the years that followed, their children grew and made their own paths. Samuel took over the ranch operations, proving to have his father's skill with horses and cattle. Rose shocked everyone by becoming a nurse, moving to Albuquerque to work in a hospital. Thomas became a teacher like his mother, opening a school in Santa Fe. Grace married young, to a good man who treated her with respect and love, and gave Helena and Xander their first grandchildren. Through it all, Helena and Xander remained each other's constant. They grew old together on the ranch where they had built their life, their love deepening with each passing year. They held hands while watching their grandchildren play. They sat together on the porch in the evenings, comfortable in silence or conversation as the mood struck them. Helena never forgot where she had come from, the darkness she had escaped, but it no longer defined her. She was not Marcus Brennan's victim. She was Xander Quinn's wife, the mother of 4 extraordinary children, a teacher who had shaped young minds, a woman who had rebuilt her life from nothing into something beautiful and meaningful. On a cool evening in the autumn of 1920, when they were both in their 60s, Xander fell ill with a fever that would not break. Helena nursed him as he had once warmed her frozen hands, with patience and determination and love. But this time, care was not enough. The doctor said his heart was giving out, worn down by years of hard work and hard living. "I am not ready to lose you," Helena whispered, holding his hand as he lay in their bed, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. "You will never lose me," Xander said, his voice weak but his eyes still clear. "I will be in every sunrise you watch, every horse you see running free, every moment of love and kindness you witness. We have had 37 years together, Helena. That is more than most people get. That is a lifetime of miracles, all starting from the day you came running through my barn door. You saved my life that day. And you saved mine right back." He smiled, the same warm smile that had first made her feel safe all those years ago. "Promise me you will keep living, truly living, not just existing. Promise me you will remember how strong you are, how brave." "I promise," she said through her tears. Xander Quinn died that night, surrounded by love, with his wife's hand in his, and the sound of his family's voices filling the room. The funeral was large, attended by seemingly everyone in the county who had known him, all coming to pay their respects to a man who had been unfailingly fair, kind, and honest. Helena grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had learned too much about her own strength over the years, had been reminded too often by Xander himself that she was capable of surviving anything. She continued to live on the ranch, with Samuel and his family close by. She taught for a few more years, until her eyes grew too weak to read easily. She watched her grandchildren grow and have children of their own. And every evening, she would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, remembering the cowboy who had hidden her in his barn, who had given her a new name and a new life, who had loved her with a steadiness and devotion that had healed wounds she thought were permanent. She remembered the feel of his hand in hers, the sound of his laugh, the way he had looked at her like she was precious and valuable and whole. Helena Quinn lived to be 81 years old, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1938, surrounded by 3 generations of family who had all been shaped by the love story that began in a blizzard in 1883. Her last words, whispered to her daughter Rose, who was sitting with her, were simple in content. "Tell him I am coming. Tell your father I kept my promise. I lived." And in the end, what more could anyone ask than that? A life fully lived, a love freely given and returned, a legacy of kindness and courage passed down through generations. It had all started with one desperate flight through the snow. One cowboy who saw a woman in trouble and chose to help without hesitation, and one brave choice to trust again, despite every reason not to. The ranch still stands, run now by Helena and Xander's great-great-grandchildren. The house expanded and modernized, but still containing the heart of the original home where 2 wounded souls found healing in each other. The barn has been rebuilt twice, but the stories remain, passed down through the family, about the winter night when their grandmother came running through waist-deep snow and their grandfather hid her, protected her, and then loved her for the rest of his life. It is a story about survival and second chances, about the power of kindness to change lives, about how love, real love, is built on respect and partnership and choice, and about how even the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures if we are brave enough to keep running toward hope, even when the way is cold and hard and uncertain. That is the legacy of Helena and Xander Quinn, and it lives on in every person who has heard their story and been reminded that everyone deserves a chance at love, at safety, at a life lived on their own terms. The Wild West was a hard place, full of danger and difficulty, but it was also a place where people could reinvent themselves, where the past did not have to define the future, where two strangers could become partners, and then lovers, and then the foundation of something that would last for generations. And it all began with one moment of compassion, one hand extended in help, one door opened to someone fleeing through the snow.